So today our topic is forgiveness. And sorry, technology is sometimes a little bit hard. There we go. So our topic today is forgiveness. And this in my own journey was a very, very critical role in helping me to move forward with my life and to be able to live the very joyous and authentic life that I'm living now. Now, I have been very fortunate that for most of my life, I have never really ever needed to hold a grudge or to be bitter or be vengeful or anything like that towards another person. In fact, I've pretty easily been able to let go of things and just move on. And I think it's because I've never really, until the breakdown of my marriage, until that point, I don't think I ever really was hurt by anybody. And I do with my self-esteem at the time, and I've shared this with you in previous weeks, but I spent many years not feeling that I was good enough and having very little self-love. And so because of that, I don't think I ever really let enough to me to be able to hurt me. So I lived a relatively happy, and if one that way, and because of that, I for someone who was pretty easygoing and just moved on with things. But I guess it's pretty easy to move on when you never get hurt. The only person who ever so close to me that they could hurt me was my husband. And certainly after 15, definitely get very, very close. And so when he hurt me, it devastated me. So much so that I could. So for the next year after we initially split up, all my energy was totally consumed by him. All I wanted to do was eat or get back at him. One of the two. I Facebook stalked him. I Facebook stalked his girlfriend. I secretly hoped that she was an awful, horrible person who made him miserable. He had left behind a fabulous person to regret and beg me to take him back so I could reject him. So horrible, horrible cycle between wanting him back and wanting to hurt him. And I just couldn't let go. It was really a horrible year. In that year, my life stagnated. I couldn't move forward at all. I move on from that. So one day, we had a large group of people. It was a really big festival, and everybody was having the most incredible time. The word that it was epic and so much joy, and I just wasn't able to share in that joy. I wanted to participate and connect with them, and I'd already come on a long journey with them. There was so much preparation. We've been meeting each other every single week, but the one person in the group that was not really connecting with everybody. Person referred to me as a mouse. You're cutting away in the get the same enjoyment out of the festival as everybody else. And one day I just looked at this and I had this complete sense of exhaustion. And all I want to experience what everybody else around me was experiencing. So I got on my bicycle, drove off into the desert. This festival was in this road, and I rode, and I couldn't hear the festival. And I sat in it. I had my journal with me, which I took out of my bag, and I just started writing. I wrote down everything that I had on my heart, all the words that I wanted to say to him, all the words that I felt about myself, and I just let it all. And when it was done, I closed the book and I never looked at it again. At that moment, it was like I'd taken all that bitterness, all that feeling of revenge, and I'd wrapped it neatly into a little package and I'd buried it in that desert. And when I got on my bicycle and rode away, it felt like a 1,000-ton weight had been on my shoulders. I felt so light. Suddenly, my experience at that festival changed, and it became one of the best experiences of my life. In fact, it was a life-changing experience for me. And the moment that I suddenly could really connect with everybody else in my group, I landed up making lifelong friendships with them. And I really was able to tap into the joy that that festival brought. Step that really changed my life into a truly meaningful life. And it was from that moment on that I was really able to start living a life that was authentic, but to do of the past and everything. Okay. So the first thing that I mentioned that I did was I sat down, and I think it's really valuable sometimes for us to really work through all the emotions that are in us. When we have all these feelings of bitterness, often there are all these emotions that we're keeping inside of us, and they're just like going over and over, stations in our head, and we're not really having any of these conversations or working through any of these emotions with. So sitting and writing it down will help us to put it into context. Sometimes it's useful to even write a letter to that. Now, not a letter that you would send to the person, but you pretend that you might send it. But write it as if you are writing to them and put everything out that you feel you. Explain what you felt went wrong. Talk also to yourself. Write also to see what your own role is in this, why you are feeling the way you do. And often when we land up writing it all out and puts it properly into perspective, it puts it properly into what happened was one specific thing that had happened in our relationship. And I put so much weight on that one specific thing without looking at the context of our relationship over 15 years. And really put all those words down. I started realizing the picture. And at the end of the day, when a relationship ends, and yes, it's easy to fixate on that one horrible thing that might have happened and put all the blame on the one person, or seldom they do just because of one person. And it allowed me really to contextualize and really to also see what is my own that relationship. So once we've written the letter and we've actually managed to put it into context and frame it correctly, really I can roll. And in that, I realized that I also had some participation in the breakdown of that relationship. And I had to take responsibility for that. I couldn't put that responsibility wholly. And then came the hard part. It came the part of being humble. We need to have humility in order to be able to acknowledge that we too have fault often when things go wrong. And when I did that, and also realized that every one of us on this earth make mistakes. And also, when I make mistakes, I'm not intending for those mistakes to be made, but I do them anyway. It suddenly made me able to see his mistake as having been malicious towards me, but just a human being who did something wrong and maybe didn't intend for it to be done wrong. And suddenly when I contextualize it that way, it's easier for me to just let go. And as I mentioned earlier, the moment that I could let go, my life changed. Those are the 3 steps. Write a letter, acknowledge what really went wrong, including your own role into it, in the situation, and then be humble enough to acknowledge that we don't do things maliciously, but because we're human beings. And it makes it so much easier then for questions now. I do see we do have one over here. So Gareth asked, do you feel access? Gareth, thank you. So is to it. I do think that what we put out does come back towards us. Certainly in my own situation, there were certain elements of what happened that I might have instigated. Behavior might have invited it. Takes him off the hook. It doesn't in any way mean that I feel that his behavior was acceptable. But certainly, I might have created an allowed for it, or that pushed for it. But it's not always the case. Sometimes things do just happen. In terms of taking a lesson out of it, I think we can always take a lesson that every us, there is opportunity in that. And certainly for me, opportunity. So that today I'm grateful for what happened when my marriage, extremely grateful, because I'm living a very different life today, and had I would not woken up, so yes, there is always opportunity. I also know that going forward, I would never approach another relationship approach that one. Would have a very different degree of maturity, and also how I see myself within a relationship would completely change. Today, I'm a more whole human being, which means that I would have a different role within that dynamic. Has another thing. It says, I have that you get what you tolerate. That's yes, could be. In my case, it was I got what I tolerated. Create an environment that escalated behavior that wasn't acceptable. If it happened to me again, I need to happen for me to learn that lesson and for me to understand my value as a human being. And this was back to things that I've previous weeks about my own issues around my self-worth and how I had not felt like I was enough. We may get what we tolerate at times. What if the hurt is too great and I cannot let go? So yes, sometimes we can do all sorts of exercises and yet still we can't let go. So I think what we need to ask ourselves is, what is the kind of life that I really want to live? What kind of person do I want to be, and what kind of impact do I want to make? And then ask yourself, if I don't let go of this hurt, if I don't let go of this bitterness, is it enabling or disabling that life I want to lead? And I think for most of us, we'll find that it'll be disabling. So then the question is, who am I really by not letting go? I'm not hurting that person who hurt me. The only person I'm hurting is myself. And because we're going to truly lead the authentic life that I want to lead. So I think it's really important to frame it that way. Particularly if we're struggling to let go, we need to acknowledge that we are only. Jen put a comment. Her comment is vulnerable and sharing your story. Thank you, Jen. Yes, it is sometimes a little hard to share, but there's our story. So thank you for acknowledging that, Jen. And then the other question that had been sent to me is, does forgiving mean that I need to trust that person again? We mix up forgiving and trusting. So forgiving, it's about ourselves. It's about and it's about allowing ourselves to move into to live. Now, depending on the situation, still have that person in our life, or we might not. If we have that person, it doesn't automatically mean that they earn our trust. And this is the word earn here is important. If someone's broken trust, they have to take the time to work and really earn that trust again. It's not automatic just because you've forgiven. So there are two processes. So the process of forgiving someone, and you're choosing that they stay in your life, or you're having difficulty to whether it's keeping them in your life or not. I think the important thing to look at, what was the nature of that relationship? Was there toxicity to it? Having that person in your life add value or take value away, and then them in. The trust takes time to be. Sometimes trust never really does get reestablished, and why that needs to be an obstacle to you moving forward. And that's really what forgiveness is about. It's about you living your life. Okay, great. So a few more comments here. Gareth wrote, that's very true, very awesome perspective. I think sometimes we forget that. Thank you, Gareth. She says, how do you allow yourself to trust again? Great. So that's as well. And that's really different. And the onus of the foremost with the person who broke your trust. And need to be sensitive that they contributed to breaking their trust. And they will have to work hard to prove that they have learned from that incident and have changed and will not do that again. And of course, it depends on the nature of the incidents. There are some incidents that maybe might never, ever earn trust again. And even if there's no trust, necessarily mean that you can't still have a relationship with that person. I wouldn't recommend that it be romantic or if you don't trust a person, but you could still have a relationship that could work. What's important is it needs to be clear that I don't useful think letting people think you don't, and also vice versa. When we have been hurt, even when people earn our trust, I don't think it's very easy to ever get to that 100% blanket trust. You know, it's almost like a piece of paper that's been crinkled. You can do everything you want to iron those crinkles out. They never really do. You can get close but you never really iron them completely out. And that is unfortunately the reality with trust, particularly on the big issues. So I think the lesson there is not to break trust in the first place. It's important to you, and don't break their trust. This quote on forgiveness. Life is too short to wake up in the morning with regrets. So love the people who don't. That everything happens. That's sort of ties back into Garrett's question earlier about whether the reason or not, or whether we invite them in. So yes, we have to learn from everything. We have an opportunity to gain value from everything, even the things that we don't. I see that's it. I see Jen says thanks, looking forward to that. So I look all of you again next week. Thank you all for joining me, and I will see you next week. Have a lovely week ahead.